History has a way of burying the truth under layers of dust and silence, but sometimes the truth refuses to stay hidden. In March 2024, during a quiet estate sale in a humid Charleston attic, a great-nephew pulled a single yellowed photograph from a forgotten cardboard box. To the untrained eye, it was just another relic of the 1890s, four sisters in their Sunday best, sitting for a formal studio portrait. But when this image reached the desk of Dr. Thomas Bennett at the Southern Museum of African American History, the room went cold. As he leaned in with a magnifying glass, his breath hitched. He wasn't looking at their faces. He was looking at their hands, positioned intentionally, palms turned upward. Their hands were a roadmap of agony, deep, jagged scars, twisted knuckles, and permanent rope burns that defied the polite history of the South. These weren't just injuries. They were evidence, in an era where the world was trying to rewrite the horrors of the rice plantations into a fairy tale of kind masters. These four women, Martha, Hattie, and little Nora, had set a trap. They knew that, while words could be silenced, a photograph is a permanent witness. They sat in that studio in 1898, not just for a family keepsake, but to commit a daring act of historical sabotage that would wait over a century to be fully understood. Today, we unbox the letters and ledgers that prove how four former slaves used a single camera lens to deliver a silent, crushing blow to the legacy of their oppressors. This is a story of how the truth always finds its way home. Imagine the suffocating heat of the Carolina Lowcountry in the 1850s, where the air is thick with mosquitoes and the smell of stagnant water. This was the world of Willowbrook Plantation, a sprawling rice empire built on the broken backs of over 300 souls. Dr. Bennett's research into the Sterling family ledgers revealed a chilling inventory from 1860. There, listed like pieces of equipment, were the names: Miriam, a field hand, and her four daughters: Sevelin, aged 8, Martha, aged 6, Hattie, aged 4, and baby Nora, just an infant at the time. In the brutal economy of rice cultivation, there was no such thing as childhood. As these girls grew, they were forced into the flooded fields from the moment they could walk, tasked with scaring birds and pulling weeds in water that reached their waists. The hand position in the photograph was no accident. It was a deliberate display of the trauma documented in the plantation's own records. Under the magnifying glass, the youngest sister, Nora's hands show the most delicate but horrific markings, thin white lines from the serrated edges of rice stalks that she was forced to bundle before her small fingers were strong enough to hold them. The letters later revealed that at just 5 years old, Nora was struck across the knuckles with a heavy cane by an overseer for dropping a bundle. The bone snapped, and without a doctor to set it, it healed as a permanent crooked reminder of a man's cruelty. But the broken bone wasn't the most shocking thing Dr. Bennett found in those medical files. There was a secret note from the doctor that changed everything. How many other stories are hidden in the physical marks we carry from our ancestors? The horror of the rice fields was unique in its physical toll. Unlike cotton, rice required constant immersion in contaminated water, where every small cut or scratch from a sharp rice stalk became a gateway for infection. Dr. Bennett uncovered the plantation doctor's journals, which noted a severe infection in Hattie's hand in 1863 and a similar fever that nearly took little Nora in the slave quarters. The doctor coldly calculated whether treatment was worth the financial investment, viewing these small children only as variables in a ledger of profit. But the sister's mother, Miriam, was the true heart of this tragedy. The records show she was one of the most productive workers, a title that masked her desperate effort to work double shifts, just to keep the overseer's eyes off her four daughters. Yet the overseer, a man named Silas Thorne, wrote in his diary that, quote, keeping families together reduces productivity, and he ensured the girls were separated from their mother during the most grueling hours. When Miriam finally collapsed and died in the fields at age 28, The overseer forbade anyone from stopping work to help her. She was buried in an unmarked grave, but her daughters made sure her story didn't stay in the dirt. Stay with me, because in a moment, we will reveal the one item found in Miriam's pocket that the sisters kept hidden for 50 years. They carried her legacy in the very skin of their palms, waiting for the day they could show the world what the Sterling family had tried to hide. If you saw the physical evidence of your family's struggle, would you have the courage to display it for the world to see? So, my question is, if you were a mother in Miriam's position, what would be the hardest thing for you to leave behind for your children? Comment below. We want to hear your thoughts on a mother's sacrifice. By 1898, the Civil War was a fading memory for the elite of Charleston, who were busy erecting statues to Southern honor. But for Evelyn, Martha, Hattie, and Nora, now free women in their late 20s and 30s, the war wasn't over. It had just shifted to the battlefield of memory. They walked into the studio of Elias Vance, one of the few black photographers in South Carolina, with a very specific request. They didn't want the soft, flattering lighting typical of the era. They wanted the truth. Vance, himself a former slave, understood immediately. His technical notes, discovered decades later, describe how he used harsh side-angled lighting to catch the ridges of the sisters' scars. In the photograph, Martha and Nora sit side by side, their palms open. Martha's palms are covered in small, perfectly circular scars. Her letter, written in May 1898, explains their origin with a chilling calmness. When she was 9, she tried to sneak a portion of her meager food ration to her baby sister, Nora, who was wasting away from hunger. The overseer, Silas Thorne, discovered the theft and used heated metal discs to brand Martha's palms as a lesson to the others. She wrote, "I screamed until I had no voice, but Nora lived to see freedom, and that is worth any scar." But wait until you see what the oldest sister, Evelyn, was hiding behind her back during this photo session. It's the key to their entire plan. Can you imagine the strength it took to sit perfectly still for a portrait, knowing you were exposing your most painful secrets to a world that didn't want to hear them? The sisters' strategy was a masterpiece of nonviolent resistance. They knew that the lost cause narrative was sweeping the nation, a movement aimed at erasing the brutality of slavery from history books. To counter this, they created a visual affidavit by positioning their hands palms up, an incredibly unusual and unladylike pose for 1898. They forced the viewer to acknowledge their trauma. They weren't asking for pity. They were providing proof. Nora's letter, the youngest and most poignant, explains that they commissioned the portrait because words can be twisted, but the skin remembers. They spent their modest savings from years of work as a seamstress, a midwife, a teacher, and a cook to ensure this image was captured on the best quality glass plates. They even made sure to wear their finest dresses, high collars, modest brooches to contrast their dignity with the industrial violence inflicted upon them. They were reclaiming their bodies from the plantation ledgers and placing them into the historical record on their own terms. It was a silent exposure of the Sterling family's wealth, showing that every dollar of that Charleston estate was paid for in the skin and bone of children. Just ahead, we'll reveal the shocking moment this photo was first shown to the Sterling family themselves. Their reaction was captured in the letter we just unearthed. When the truth is hidden behind a wall of politeness, is a shocking revelation the only way to break through. So tell me, do you believe that a family's reputation should be held accountable for the actions of their ancestors? Tell us your story. Have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed how you saw your history? The ultimate victory of the sisters wasn't just in the taking of the photo, but in how they used it to destroy the social standing of those who oppressed them. Dr. Bennett discovered that Evelyn and Nora didn't just keep the photo in an attic. They brought it to the Emmanuel AIM Church in 1903. Newspaper clippings from the Charleston Chronicle describe a hushed silence as the four sisters stood before the congregation, and held up the portrait. At a time when the Sterling descendants were trying to run for local office based on their distinguished family history. The sisters were there with the receipts. They didn't use fire or steel. They used the power of public testimony. They spoke at community meetings, showing their hands in the photograph to anyone who would listen, effectively making the Sterling name synonymous with the brutalization of children. But the real twist came 40 years later, when one of the Sterling heirs tried to buy the photo back to destroy it. What happened next will leave you speechless. The social honor the Sterlings craved was dismantled by the quiet, persistent presence of 4 women who refused to be forgotten. Through the 1920s and 1930s, the sisters participated in oral history projects, ensuring their specific stories of the Willowbrook rice fields were filed in state archives. Their revenge was the most enduring kind. They became the authors of their own history, while their oppressors' names faded into infamy. How does it feel to know that a simple piece of paper could be more powerful than a whip? As Dr. Bennett traced the bloodline forward, he found a legacy of triumph that the Sterlings could never have imagined. Evelyn's great-great-granddaughter, Dr. Alicia Vance, is a retired physician, an Atlanta woman who heals hands for a living. When she stood in the museum and saw the enlarged image of the 4 sisters' scarred palms, she realized that her own success was the justice her ancestors had dreamed of. The sisters had survived the rice fields, survived the infections, and survived the branding to build a family that would eventually produce the very doctors and scholars who would tell their story. Hattie became a midwife, and little Nora, who had once been starving, became a renowned cook and community leader, ensuring no child in her Charleston neighborhood ever went hungry. In just 30 seconds, we will show you the hidden inscription on the back of the photo that reveals exactly who they wanted to see this image in the future. They used their freedom to educate their children, creating a ripple effect of literacy and professional achievement that lasted over a century. The Sterling fortune eventually crumbled as the rice industry collapsed, their grand estate falling into ruin. But the sisters' wealth, their family, and their truth only grew. When the world tries to take everything from you, is the best revenge simply to thrive and tell the truth? Which of the 4 sisters' stories resonated with you the most? Let's honor their memory in the comments. Type the name of the sister you'd want to thank today. The story of Evelyn, Martha, Hattie, and Nora reminds us that justice doesn't always arrive with a gavel or a shout. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet click of a camera shutter. For over 100 years, that photograph sat in a cardboard box, a dormant seed of truth, waiting for the right moment to bloom. When Dr. Bennett enlarged those hands, he didn't just see scars. He saw a map of survival. The sisters knew that their lives had value, and they used the only tools they had, their bodies, their memories, and a brave photographer to ensure that the monsters of Willowbrook would never be able to hide behind their marble statues. They didn't seek a violent end for their tormentors. They sought something much more permanent, the truth. By documenting their suffering with such dignity and clarity, they stripped the Sterling family of their most precious asset, their reputation. Today, the names of the sisters are etched into the halls of the Southern Museum of African American History, while the plantation owners are remembered only for the cruelty documented in their own ledgers. This is the legacy of the 4 sisters from Charleston. They taught us that while injustice can break bones and scar skin, it cannot reach the soul of those who are determined to be heard. Their hands, once forced to labor in the mud for no pay, now hold the attention of the world. They proved that clever strategy and the preservation of truth are the ultimate weapons against oppression. As we look at their faces one last time, we see not victims but victors. They are the authors of a narrative that could not be silenced, and their scars are the signatures on a document of freedom that can never be erased. Let their story be a reminder to all of us. Your truth is your power, and as long as it is told, you can never truly be defeated. Their journey from the mud of the rice fields to the light of the archive is the final satisfying payoff of a justice a century in the making. As we close this chapter on Evelyn, Martha, Hattie, and Nora, I want to ask you something deeply personal. How many stories like theirs are still sitting in dusty boxes, waiting for someone to finally look at them with the love and attention they deserve? The four sisters proved that even when we are silenced, our legacy finds a way to speak, but only if there is someone willing to listen. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the quiet strength of the women in your own family tree, please take a moment to subscribe. Asterisk.